All right.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Margaret here. Adam's behind the camera. You can't see him, but he's there. Hi, Adam. Today I have the honor of being with Jeff Monague. I'll let you introduce yourself in your own language.
Anishinaabe, Mahingan Jeff Monague, Gishin. In my language, what I said was, my name is Wolf, that's Mahingan, and my Indian act name is Jeff Monague.
And we're here today on the shores of what we now call Lake Simcoe, and we're doing a series of videos and stories to talk a little bit about the history of the places that are special to our communities. Lake Simcoe tends to be one of those places that people around Simcoe County flock to for recreation. They appreciate the beauty of it. And I don't know how many people out there that would be watching this actually know a bit of the history of Lake Simcoe, because it had other names before it, and it had a history long before it was ever known as Lake Simcoe. So today I've asked my friend Jeff to come and talk a little bit about Lake Simcoe.
A long time ago, the Anishinaabe, the people who lived in this area, we referred to it as Zhoonyaa Gaamin, which means the place of the shining waters, and it was also a place of trade. This area right here along the shoreline here in Barrie today, it was also a place of trade. It had been for thousands and thousands of years, and it was a place of trade way back when, even before the fur trade began, even before this place was named, the lake was named after John Grave Simcoe. It would never have been named after a person in our culture because it doesn't belong to anybody individually.
Well, we had a little bit of a coffee and a chat earlier, and we were just trying to bridge a little bit about the different cultures and the way of knowing and being. And I was saying, and Adam we're talking about how in our culture, getting something named after you is seen as a large honor. And we were talking like, well, that really makes it like, well, you've really made it when you have a building named after you, or a statue, or a highway, or a lake, which we think kind of sets up that idea that it can belong to one person and not necessarily a shared resource. So, yeah, kind of what you were saying there.
Yeah, and most of the lakes in our region were named for their land features, not necessarily named after individuals, unless you had a significant event. Maybe you had a fallen chief at that point, or a fallen warrior, or there may have been a great battle. Then it would have been named for an individual would have fallen at that battle. So there are places around Simcoe County where those kinds of things have happened. One example that I can give you is a place called Waubaushene, which takes its name from the Anishinaabe word, which was Waubaushene, and Waubaushene apparently was a warrior who fought in the mid-1700s in a great battle that had taken place there, and he fell there, and he was one of the principal war chiefs. So that place was named for him.
We're hoping that the people out there can appreciate that this place has thousands and thousands of years of history. And you were talking a little bit about when you go over to over in the spot there, there's those brass footprints of the trail that was taking the trading route. So can you talk a little bit about how you're saying Lake Simcoe was a large port, if you will, for trading?
Yeah, exactly. So for thousands of years, it had been an area where people congregated for trade, and nations would come here. In this area right here along the shoreline, there was actually little villages that were here, and it was an Odena, which means that it was a little town that people came to do trade, and then they would go back up into Georgian Bay. They would take the Mikasan that were there, what we would call in French portage routes. So there's one that led from here, from this shoreline, all the way up to Nottawasaga River, or Nottawasaga, Zibi, and out into Georgian Bay.
Mm-hmm. Do you mind sharing with me, because you did earlier, about the Nottawasaga, that you just said it in your own language, but what kind of the meaning of that is?
Okay, so Nottawasaga River was actually called the Nottawasaga Zibi, which means a polite way of doing it is saying it is where the enemy comes out of. But it's actually a very derogatory term when we're speaking of our enemy, and it's not a very pleasant word when you're saying Nottawasaga. And we had lookouts on the Blue Mountains and Collingwood, and we would look toward that river, and when we saw the enemy coming out of there, then we would light fires to alert everybody that there was going to be a skirmish, and that all the fires would be seen by everybody along the Bruce Peninsula and all the way up along the shore of the Anishinaabe, along the shore of Georgian Bay, and they would light fires to let each other know that something was going to take place, and they would all gather to take place in that skirmish if it was necessary. So Nottawasaga, like I said, is a nice way of saying where the enemy comes out of, but it is actually a very derogatory term. So it's kind of a it's a bit of a humorous thing for us to think that ended up on the maps here in Canada, and when you really don't know what it means after a while, and it's been changed. It was anglicized, but still we know what it means, and we still know that it shouldn't really be on the maps.
Right. And then you were saying something, not to go through all of the names, but you also said something similar about Huron.
Yes. Well, the name, the Huron name is another one that happened in the 1600s when Champlain and his people encountered the Wendat people, as they always called themselves that, and we always called them that, the Wendat people. And it was Champlain that his people had began calling them the Huron, which at that point in time in their history, when you start doing the research, that word was actually a derogatory term back in France. It was used to describe a derelict or somebody that was unwelcome in society. They also used it because Champlain's writings indicated that it was used to describe the way the Wendat people wore their hair, and it was sticking straight up. So to them, it was to describe the hair on the back of a pig's head. So they called them that, the hair on the back of a pig's head people.
All right. So thank you for that, Jeff. Sounds like you're busy. We hope that in the end that what you will get out of this is understanding that there's a shared history here. There's a history before this became Barrie, before this became Lake Simcoe and what we know now. And we're hoping that these sort of stories can help enlighten everybody about how we can move forward once we understand kind of where this all came from. Didn't just start with white explorers, right? There's a large history here that we should all be very proud of, but it takes us a little bit of effort to get to know it first. So we're hoping with Jeff's help and other Indigenous voices to help bring that history so that we can all feel a sense of place that's greater than just what we're taught in history books. Anything else to add?
It is a nice place, always has been. Even with Barrie here, it's still a nice place. I like coming here. And I can see why my people were wanting always to be at this place.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, everybody.